you doing, guys? This is Eric from RuleTheWasteland.com. This is part 4 of an interview I did with David the Good, author of Compost Everything and Grow or Die, 2 great prepping related gardening books that you can find on Amazon. Links will be in the description box below, where you can also find his website, thesurvivalgardener.com, and previous portions of the interview. So enjoy, and thanks for watching. So you've been doing this for years. You got the experience. What made you decide to actually sit down and write the books about the survival gardening, about the composting? Like, you had the decades of knowledge now. What was made you cross that threshold to say, I got to get this on paper. The world needs me.
Well, a few years ago, I worked in radio, doing radio production and writing. I wrote scripts, and I would promote a lot of stuff I didn't even like because I was hired to be a writer. And they're like, "Can you write about this book for, you know, it's about horses and kids on drugs?" And I'm like,
sales copy.
And I'm reading them, going, I don't even like this book. I don't even like where they're coming from. They're weirdos, you know. But you got to be. The incredible story of how a horse changed a crackhead's life. You're like, no, crackhead's too rough. Right. Changed an addict's life. No. Changed a substance abuse. Yeah, like, and you're just like day after day writing stuff for things you don't like and you don't believe in, and then meanwhile I go home and I garden. Like, I just got an hour of light, I'm gonna garden. I told my wife about 4 years ago or so, I was talking with her, and I said I should just start a daily gardening site and track some of what I'm doing and then see if it takes off. And if it takes off, I'll write a book.
And that's how the survivalgardener.com got started?
Right. And I started with Florida survival gardening, but then when I switched to more, I ended up with a national audience because of interviews and different connections, and then compost.
So why limit it? Yeah.
It's like, I'm not going to do Florida survival gardening, so I bumped everything over to thesurvivalgardener.com.
Right.
And I was writing for the Prepper Project, and I write for Mother Earth News, and I've written for Backwoods Home magazine. So I wanted people, you know, somebody in Alaska maybe come. They might shut them out. Right. They might be jealous of some of the stuff I'm growing, but there's more data there they can use.
Yeah.
And so I thought, after a couple of years of it, I said, you know, this is actually going pretty good. I'm starting to get a readership. I wasn't exactly sure what I wanted to write, but I was in love with the food forest idea, and I had built a food forest. I had built 2 food forests in Florida and assisted with 3 others. And I went, I'm going to write a little book on how to create a Florida food forest with species lists, like, just for this area. You know, so somebody can look at it, they don't have to recreate everything from scratch. I had all these species I tested and figured out which ones did and which ones didn't. And I wrote this little book of inspiration. It's called Create Your Own Florida Food Forest.
And you said this is actually being used as like a textbook now in some places.
Well, this one got passed all around. It's actually totally crazy easy Florida gardening that's been used as
that's the other book.
Which was now an expanded Florida gardening book. But the Create Your Own Florida Food Forest, there's only like 70 pages or something. It's a little teeny book. But I noticed it started selling, and it sells like, you know, $100 worth of books a month, and I was like, awesome. $100 royalties, you know? I'm like, that's pretty good, you know? And then like one of the local farm stores started carrying it. I'm like, okay, cool, you know? And then I approached Castalia House with a compost
Which they were initially like, you had known Fox Day for a little while by then, and he was a little bit, I wouldn't say reluctant, I guess, but he was not his wheelhouse.
He's like, I don't even like mowing the lawn. I'm allergic to grass, you know. And he's like, but I'll try it. What the heck? Yeah. And then it flew.
Maybe Scalzi would have rather published it. He likes lawns.
Well, there's a lot on destroying your lawn. Right. I keep talking. Take your lawn out and plant food.
I bet he doesn't have a compost pile.
I bet he doesn't.
No. So that leaves me another question.
He probably does for his victims.
Is who should be composting?
Oh, everybody should be composting. Everybody should be composting, yeah. I mean,
so it's not just for people who have even just a half an acre or whatever. I think there's advantage, because that was one thing I liked about one of the many things that was in your book that would separate it from the other composting book, was that you had a very long list of the benefits of composting. The other books kind of take it for granted that you're already like accepting that composting is awesome.
And it had everything from like hardcore survival reasons, like you'll starve to death if you don't have fertilizers for your garden, to like eco-green reasons, like you don't want to throw that in a landfill, do you?
Which there's another website guy that I follow who's pretty much, that's his only reason for composting, is that he's not into preparedness or even really into, he doesn't even garden, he just does it for like the green way to get rid of waste without dumping it in a landfill. And that's sort of one of the things that actually increased my composting, is that where I live, we have to pay for the size garbage can that we get. So I became really militant about like separating out everything that didn't have, because I got the tiniest can because I'm a cheapskate, and I was like, I will not pay for a bigger can.
And deliberate minimalism.
So everything else was either recycling. It made me really militant about the recycling and the composting. which I was already doing anyway, but now I'm like, this part is paper, I can rip that off and compost it, and I have a shredder and then shred it and just compost it. And I mean, I don't really even do enough gardening to where it matters. I just throw it in a pile,
right?
And then eventually it's dirt, and then you can do something with it.
And half the time, something will grow out of the compost pile anyways, you know. Like
pumpkin seeds will explode out of there.
2 years ago, we got 200 pounds of pumpkins out of a compost pile
I
because
saw one
they
where
started growing.
the sprout was about like 2 feet long because it was so deep in the compost pile, but it just kept going up and up and up.
It's
and it was
amazing.
like this white thing until you got little green, 2 green leaves at the end.
Nature finds a way. It breaks free.
It does it right. So what else do I got here? We already said what things you shouldn't put in the compost. We got your Just Do It message. We went over the yam song. Oh, here's one that you went over this a little bit in your book, I think, but like compost contamination, which the big one that you mentioned,
oh man,
which no one else had talked about is that I've seen, was the things that come out in the manure.
This is the nastiest thing. I just wrote an article 2 weeks ago
It's such like
on
a sleeper
straw
because,
bale gardening.
Yeah.
Why
so explain
straw
what I'm
bale
talking
gardening?
about here and what the issue is that's in the book. You don't have to give away all the book secrets, but just the main premise.
Everybody needs to know this one. I don't care if they buy the book or not. They just have to know this because within the last decade, for the most part, some new herbicides have come out that are for control of broadleaf weeds in grasslands. So we're talking like blackberry, pigweed, things like that, like things that they consider weeds on horse pastures or cow pasture. They want grazing land. They want perfect hay.
Right.
And this stuff is one of them is called, one of the most popular ones is called Grazon, and it's from Dow Agrochemicals. Grazon, the reason they call it Grazon is you can spray it, and then they haven't proved that it hurts the animals. So the animals can graze.
We have no particular reason to think that this is bad for them.
Right.
So you can just graze fresh, wet herbicides.
Wet with herbicides.
Yeah, exactly.
Dripping with science. So they can go out there and go grazing on it.
Mm-hmm.
And
which so far doesn't seem to be hurting the horses or cows.
Right. But the problem is that it's a very persistent molecule. They'll eat the grass, then they'll use they'll just drop their manure, and then people will come and take the manure to put in their gardens. Hey, look, there's a pile of horse manure. Hey, can I have some of your horse manure? Absolutely, help yourself. They'll pour it in their gardens, and then all their gardens, the plants start to grow, but then they start twisting. The growth starts getting distorted. It's an auxin inhibitor. It inhibits the stacking function of the cells. Okay. So the cells, instead of being nice blocks like they're supposed to be, they start going like this. And so you'll see the leaf start to grow, and then the edge starts to curl and starts to turn in, and it turns. It's the most disgusting, satanic-looking thing you've ever seen. Yeah. You're like, what the heck is going on with these plants? And the way I discovered it was, I guess it was about 4 years ago now. I got a load of manure and dropped it out front here from a local dairy guy, and I put it along my blackberries. I put it on some of the new trees I'd planted in the food forest. I put it in my garden beds. I spread it all over. I got a double load, 60 bucks, man.
Put it everywhere.
Beautiful looking, and it had been composted for like 6 months, so it wasn't hot anymore. And then I start getting all this distorted growth a few weeks later, and it was on all these different plants. And at first I saw it on the tomatoes, and like maybe they got a virus.
This is not a virus. It's like affecting everything.
Okay, but there wouldn't be a virus that affects tomatoes, mulberries, and blackberries.
Or a bug normally that does all those.
Right, and then I'm like, is it getting burned because there's too much nitrogen in this stuff? Maybe it didn't go enough.
Too hot.
It's green, but it's like But like the leaves on the papaya were starting to get thick and like they were fat, like pancakey shape. I'm like, what the heck is that crap?
Been cursed.
You know, I'm like, golly. And so I started researching and I started reading. It took me about a week to figure out what was going on. And I tracked it down to the manure. I'm like, it's got to be one of these herbicides, because I read about a community garden in the UK that got hit with some stuff.
Right.
And so I wrote I wrote an article for local Natural Awakenings magazine, which runs over 3 or 4 counties. I was writing a little what to do in your garden this month type of thing. I told the woman, I said, can I do a 2-pager?
This is important.
I said, this is like some serious stuff, and I got some nasty looking photos. And she goes, yeah, absolutely. So I wrote it, and she's like, this is incredible. So I wrote it, and at that point, that was the first real garden writing article that I had done. I had just done, fiddling around on the blog and writing the little local column.
So not only did you discover this issue, it got your feet wet in the writing about
I just went, man, I can really change people's lives.
Yeah.
And after I wrote it, I started getting contacted by people. And I got contacted by Mother Earth News, and they said, do you want to write about this for us? And so I ended up writing for Mother Earth News because they had seen this thing that I'd done.
And this is something that, like you said, because it's cropped up in the past 8 or 10 years, all these other big composting books, or the few others that are out there.
Nobody covers it.
Well, they were old, you know, like
Yeah,
the Rodale Book of Composting. It's been around for decades, even like, so no one even knows about it, or if they do now, it's not in those books.
And almost every website still says, you know, the best organic fertilizer is manure. Like, you cannot trust.
Technically true, but
It's true.
If you have these herbicides that have been passed to the
We're
animals,
talking 2 to 3 years.
you're
This
literally
stuff destroys the ground.
putting weed killer in your garden.
Yeah, 2 to 3 years, the garden is dead.
Yeah.
And I had somebody tell me they plowed up a half an acre.
They
and
had
they
to take
plowed
the
manure
dirt away.
in, and they said they planted. They said our whole garden, nothing came up this year. We can't figure out what's going on. They're like, stuff. They said, well, a couple of things came up. I said, did it really not come up? They said a couple of things came up, but they all got like weird and twisty,
like,
and then
"Did
they
you use
died.
manure?"
I said, did you put manure on it? Oh yeah, we got it. We've been using this manure for years. I said, you got some? No, you can't. And because it's on the straw. The grasses pick the stuff up, and it's in the straw, it's in the hay, it's in grains, which means if you have a bale of straw to protect your garden in the winter, it's potentially got this stuff in it which will destroy it. There's somebody up in Gainesville who posted pictures of her garden a few years after my experiment. She says, I thought this stuff was safe. I read David the Good's blog, and I knew to ask, so I asked them, and they said they didn't spray anything. And she said, apparently somebody sprayed something, because the whole thing, all of her perennial beds are all twisted up.
Or maybe they bought hay, you know, like they didn't spray, but they bought it and they ate it. So that's crazy.
Yeah, if it's hay, straw, manure, none of it is trustworthy. The only one I would probably trust would be like Black Cow bagged manure, because I think their business plan, they must have, I've been meaning to interview them because they must have a way of keeping it out, because I've never heard of anybody getting hit with that bag stuff.
Right.
But if you get like city municipal compost, it often has heavy metals and other things in it. You don't know if it's got herbicides in it. It's just, it's like you can barely get away from the poisons, and a lot of gardens get wrecked and people don't understand what happened. They just think they made a mistake. Maybe it was bad seeds, maybe it was bad this or bad this, or the soil's bad, or no, you probably got poisoned.
Wow.
And it's everywhere. I just did that big post on why straw bale gardening can wreck your garden for years. And everybody goes, I want to do a straw bale garden. And there's still a bazillion articles online, people starting their straw bale gardens, but a lot of those are going to fail.
Right.
And they wouldn't have failed a few years ago. It's a great idea a few years ago. You know, no longer.
So another contamination issue that I've seen people, it's almost like an argument within the composting community of whether it matters or if it's not a big deal, is microplastics. How much you know about the microplastics? Things like if you shred up an envelope and there's like the little plastic window on it and you compost that, or like a McDonald's cup, little things like that have these like paper, like these plastic linings. Is that something that you worry about, or do you not really compost any of that commercial type stuff?
I try to avoid all of the little bits. I mean, you can't help occasionally pulling out one of the plastic stickers from a fruit or something. I mean, in an ideal world, I would have so many plants growing here for biomass that all of my compost could come off this property. And a lot of it comes off this property. But still, we're still buying things occasionally. Like, you know, somebody brings us a bag of apples. I'm not going to throw the apples away because they're commercial apples, you know. My apples aren't coming in for another 15 years, so, you know.
Trees! Trees! And I think this comes up more often among the people who are composting for, like, eco reasons, because not only are they trying to get rid of trash, you know, you're trying to more use it to create. So they were like, I need to get this, could be composted, and it also is that they're more worried about the thing. So from my understanding of it, it seems that it's present in the eventual product, but I don't know to what extent it affects anything, I guess is. I don't know if you'd heard anything about that.
Yeah, I know some of the plastics have endocrine disruptors and
like BPAs or something
like
that.
And you go, I don't know. I mean, maybe they're spraying in the sky too. We have no idea. We have no idea what's coming in.
I always wonder, like, how.
So.
I mean, because obviously it's possible for things to get like through the entire compost process and still affect like these pests or these herbicides. But for something like a piece of plastic, once it's been composted and then you grow a tomato out of that compost, is the tomato really going to be affected by that? Who knows?
I think most of them, if they're not breaking down, they're probably not making much. Probably not making much difference. And I think that fungi will probably end up destroying or enveloping a lot of that stuff.
That would be my guess.
You know, over the next 10,000 years.
Right, something minor time frame like
until
that.
the Earth dies a fiery death.
Right, the inevitable heat death of the universe.